Welcome to the John Harrison Podcast. Do you realize that 70% of people are disengaged at work? I don't think it's an overstatement to call that a tragedy, actually, because it affects the bottom lines of organizations, certainly, but it has a negative impact on all the people that work there, and their families, and the community at large. Nobody's talking about this. Well, on this podcast, we are going to talk about it. Welcome to the John Harrison Podcast, and I always get excited about these episodes, but this one is probably the one I've been most excited about because my guest is Jennifer Harrison, same last name, that's on purpose. She's my wife, and Jen and I have been together about 20 years and been married 18, and so we've been talking about this, and again, I'm just thrilled to have her on the episode today. So we're going to talk about obviously all of our podcast real life stuff. We're going to talk about in this episode really just from a marriage point of view, how spouses can support each other from a career point of view, and what happens when people get home from work and how that all plays out. We're going to talk about mistakes we've made along the way as well, and then kind of what's working today. So as always, just real life stuff. But with that, again, I met Jen in 2002. But Jen, just a little bit about your background from a workplace point of view before even you and I getting together, what you did for your professional life, and then how we met.
Yeah, so I started working in the restaurant business from high school, all kinds of different positions, and then was lucky enough to get promoted to manage a local restaurant from our hometown, and of course was thrown into leadership instantly. I had waited tables, bartended, done all of that, but had never been a leader. I think I was 22 at the time. So that was interesting, and I actually loved it because I love people, but I certainly was not trained or ready for it. Made lots of mistakes, but really, really enjoyed that part of it. I loved the hiring. I loved just doing the schedules. I loved getting to know my employees. So that was fun. And then I had a life change and needed to get out of the restaurant business. That was at 26. So I had done that for 10 years and went to work at Caterpillar. Started at the lowest level position possible in the company. I was basically doing health claims, but was very grateful to have that job. It was regular hours, health insurance, 401k, all those things I had never had in the restaurant business. So it gave me some stability. And then somehow, I'm not sure how, worked my way up to be a paralegal in the legal department at corporate. And that's where I met you. And then we got married and were sent overseas 3 months later.
Yes.
Therefore, I could no longer work at Caterpillar in that capacity because you would have been my boss. So I went on what they call spousal leave, stayed on spousal leave until you left Caterpillar.
Yes. So there's a lot more to that story, which maybe we'll put on future podcasts. But for today, we'll keep it short. And so I'll just say this as we start off. So again, so half of my life with Jen, I was working at CAT and in the corporate world and running factories and overseas, as she just said, and long hours and a lot of responsibility and stress and things like that I had to deal with. She was amazing through that, every step of that. And then most of you know my story that I left the corporate life in 2011 and eventually ventured into this little business called John Harrison, all from a faith calling to use my time differently. And she was amazing through that and really just has kept me afloat in support and prayer and encouragement through that big change in our lives. So she's been on this kind of roller coaster ride in my career all along the way, and just been amazing in that regard. So we're going to talk about from both sides too, right? Because a lot of people are listening. Both of you in the couple are working, and so that's different. Some of you have little children. Some maybe could be empty nesters. One of you might be working, both working from home. We know there's a million combinations out there. So this is just going to be more kind of the things that we think work in any instance. But just from the kickoff here, what would be overall advice you would give spouses in terms of being there to support the other person from a work perspective?
Well, obviously, I can only speak from the spouse of the person who's working full time. And yes, I did make lots of mistakes. You said I was wonderful through all of that, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. I think just getting back to marriage vows. I met you when you worked at Caterpillar. You were being promoted. When I met you, you were on kind of a fast path of your career. And so when I married you, I knew that this was your life. And sometimes I hear a lot of spouses say, I didn't sign up for this, or this is not what I expected, or I didn't realize it was going to be this hard. And, our vows are kind of clear. We are to stay committed, and we're on the journey with our spouse, no matter what that is, whether you would be promoted or whether you would have lost your job. And so I did sign up for this. I think the other thing sometimes, especially maybe for stay-at-home moms, but I think for anyone, we always think our day is harder than our spouses. We start to get in this mentality of, oh, he or she doesn't know what it's like. For me, she doesn't understand, he doesn't understand. And so just getting out of that mindset that they don't get how hard it is for me, and then kind of holding that against them a little bit. I think that's probably a mistake and not a good place to be. And then I also thought about, John, maybe just like you speak to companies about not completely taking all of the wind and good out of their people before they go home. We have to be careful not to be taking all the good out of our spouses before they go to work. Mm-hmm. So being cognizant of that and sensitive to that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, again, we'll share a lot of just real life, successes and mistakes, as Jen just said. But I think we can all do that where we think the other person has the easier go, like you said. I also think, when we get home, when the spouse, again, both spouses getting home from work, or if one's already there, whatever, doesn't matter, but just realizing that the other one needs some time. Possibly part of that could be the spouse that wants to talk about his or her day and what frustrations or good things happen during the day, or it could be with kids or whatever, letting the other person have that time. And that's hard, that rhythm is, we're going to kind of end this podcast on talk about rhythm, but that takes a while to figure out, and people change jobs. Some people, we talk about in our sessions, different personality types. Some personality types, the way they're going to deal with stress is they want to talk and they want to be around people. Mm-hmm. And other people go, no, I need some quiet time, and maybe I'm going to exercise for 30 minutes, or I'm going to, jump in the shower or take a nap, or just understanding what the other person needs in terms of kind of having their just energy rekindled is big. And I know that's difficult for us when we first started, just to understand that, because it's hard to explain the pressures of the day to somebody that wasn't there. And so just that rhythm takes a while to get there as well. Let's talk about mistakes or things that, like, you mentioned one just a minute ago, but what are some other things that you learned along the way that might help our listeners?
Well, especially with your travel schedule when we were overseas, I remember being distant to you maybe the week before you left, maybe picking fights a little bit. It's almost like I was preparing my heart for you to be gone, and maybe distancing myself a little bit was a way for me to cope maybe a little bit. Mm-hmm. That was not beneficial. Nor was every time you tell me you have to be out of town, you have to travel, you're going to be late, me acting sad, me acting put out, disappointed is also not helpful. I should be your biggest cheerleader. I should be supporting all these opportunities you have to do what you were made to do. So again, I'm kind of stealing from your bank every time I do that. And not that I'm happy when you leave. I never tell you that.
Hope not.
But, just saying, okay, tell me about the trip. I hope it goes well and all of that. So definitely, hopefully doing better in that vein.
Yeah, and I think, myself, I'm a thinker, and so I can, a week before I'm going on a trip or getting ready for a session, that's on my mind, and I'm thinking about things without maybe expressing that to Jen, especially early on. And so I know it's very common for couples, if Jen were to say, "Are you okay? Or is everything okay?" And I would just say, "Well, I'm busy, or I'm thinking about stuff," and that's a quick answer, but I think it's a little disrespectful to the other person just to say that instead of being more specific about, "Well, I'm really concerned about, this is a new group I've never spoken to, or I've got a lot of work to do before I jump on that airplane," and that way, because when we say we're tired, we're thinking about stuff, or we're just stressed, it's really kind of cuts off the other person instead of being a little more communicative about what is on your mind. And then also, I knew it took me a while to realize, just like Jen said, when I was gone, I know she was taking on lots of other things, and she's incredibly bright and incredibly self-reliant and can be very independent. But I had to realize that some of the difficulties that she was in when I wasn't either physically around in a different country or just busy, and just making sure, trying to, again, mistakes I made younger was probably not saying, what can I do for you? What are things I can do to help you this week before I leave? Just kind of having that mindset. And we talk about this in our sessions a little bit too, that I think it's normal sometimes for, I will say, I believe I tried to have as best of work-life balance as I could, even though I had, pretty demanding jobs, but I did work a lot of hours, still do at times, and realizing, and Jennifer was always so great about not putting guilt on me about hours, because that's the other thing. I think spouses can say, "Oh, like, so you're working Saturday?" Like, I guess you must just love your job more than you love me, or things like that. And those are not, Jen never did that, which is helpful. Now, if somebody says that, and again, I talk about this in our sessions, if your spouse says, "Well, you just must love your job more than you do me and the kids," or whatever, that's probably not what the person really is wanting to convey. They probably are wanting to convey, we want to spend more time with you. We miss you. We miss you. Mm-hmm. So I try to tell spouses in those situations, then just say that. Mm-hmm. Just say, "Man, I miss hanging out with you, and we haven't had good connection time lately." Because if you say that, it's pretty hard for that person to come back with a defensive comment. If the person says, "You love your job more than you do us," that's where people come back and go, "Oh, so do you like the house that we have? Do you like our vacations? Do you like our vehicles?" Because if you don't care about that, then fine, I'll just quit. And it gets to be kind of a sarcastic, defensive response, instead of just saying, "You know what? I feel like we haven't had as much time together." And I think that's it. I'm just thanking Jennifer for, she has been really good about not putting guilt on me about long hours at times, or travel, things like that.
Well, that's a good segue into what does work. You are excellent at communicating. I am very blessed to have a husband who shares his day, connects with me when you get home. One thing I like to kind of maybe call it our marital hygiene, if you will. We're getting our calendars out on a regular basis. What do we have this week? It kind of manages expectations a little bit, knowing that maybe I have something on a Saturday, or me knowing that you're out of town these 2 nights, instead of you telling me the day before, "Hey, I'm gone the next 2 days." Or me telling you, "No, I'm not free Saturday. I have a cooking class," or something. I think we do that really well, constantly checking in on each other's schedules. And then when you do that, then you can plan your time and plan what we're going to do, so that I know I'm going to see you. I know we're going to do something together this week or next weekend, but it just may look different than what I thought.
Yeah. So I think proactively looking at calendars, talking about the week or two coming ahead is, and again, I wasn't always good at that, because even now our little business, I do lots of different things, and all of a sudden, because this has happened sometimes, where I've said, now remember, I'm gone Thursday night, and you might go, I'm not sure I knew that.
I don't have that on my calendar.
and it's probably happened the other way where Jen might say, well, so and so's coming over this weekend or whatever, and it's possible she told me and I didn't remember, but I think that being on top of those things is good. I think another part of our rhythm that's working so much better today, as you all know that are listening, I speak a lot. I'm with people all day long, which I love. But Jen's really good about understanding in the evenings, because she's generally managing our social calendar, I would say 90% of the time. But she knows for this Friday night, we probably just need to stay home or do something with just neighbors or smaller group, because after 3 days of speaking for 8 hours every day, he's going to need a little bit of a break. I'm more on the introverted side, and Jen has also helped me with that. That if it was up to me, maybe we would rarely do like bigger things with lots of people, but I always love it. I always have a great time when we do. But talk about that a little bit, because I think we've had to learn that rhythm too about.
Yeah, that probably was in my mistake bucket as well. I'm social. We have some property that lends itself to gathering people. That's kind of my ministry. So any opportunity I can do that, I love to do that. The problem is sometimes it's not always after a restful week for my husband. So John, you've been working, you've been out of town. I remember one time, I don't remember where it was, but you were gone. You were coming in on a Friday at like 5, and I had a party scheduled at 6 in our barn. And, those kind of things, it wasn't that I wasn't thinking of him. I just wasn't thinking about what his needs were. And of course he was great about it. But so, yeah, protecting your time a little bit. But like you said, on the other side, you also need other people in your life besides me. And you need community, and you need friends, and that's part of your health as well. So I think we've got it after 20 years, a pretty good balance of both of those.
I agree, and because Jen just said she feeds off of, and she loves on people very well. Hospitality is certainly one of her clear spiritual gifts. So I've got to make sure that we're all selfish as human beings, and I love just hanging out with her. So I could say, hey, this weekend that's coming up, why don't you and I can go out to dinner Friday night? We could just hang out and play tennis Saturday and work on the property. And I have to remember that she gets energy, and she needs other people in her life other than me, right? So I've got to make sure that I'm coming alongside her and helping her have those opportunities where she can use her gifts and be around other people. And like I said, I always have a good time when we're with other folks, but if sometimes we can get selfish and just kind of cocoon and not think of the other person in that way. So I think, that's a rhythm that's probably much better than it was.
I also think me organizing my days better so that I am more available to you. I have a very full life, but I have a flexible life where you don't. Your hours are pretty spelled out for the week. So getting errands done, getting chores done, having dinner prepped, all those things so that I can be available when you come home, and I'm not rushing around and not able to hear your day if you want to share it with me and all those things. That's been something I've really tried to work on. Just kind of makes the home a sanctuary, if you will. That sounds a little corny, but it just puts me in a better position to really be present for you when you get home from your 12-hour day.
Yes, that's another awesome thing that you do. And I think when Jen and I first met and first got married, we both worked at Caterpillar, so we kind of had that. Both had full-time job life a little bit as well, different than we have today. But this is something, again, I'm not always good at, but I try to, when I get home, even if it's been a tough day, I I feel like 90% of the time I'll say, is there anything I can do for you right now? Like, this is right after
Every
I get
time.
home. Anything you need, because part of me may go just take a shower and get
Well,
refreshed.
you're also texting me not only when you're on your way home, and I don't need you to do that. I'm not sitting there waiting. I'm doing other things, taking care of the garden, all that stuff. But you are respectful to say, hey, 20 minutes out, anything I can pick up for you. And I think for couples who are both working,
That's big.
that would be a great little thing to do. Just check in. You also check in with me sometime during the day. How's your day? Or maybe we had talked about something. Maybe I had to face something that you knew about, or how'd it go? And that's just that communication, me knowing your day, who you're with, who your client is, being able to kind of think about you, pray for you, check on how's it going, how's the session going. It's just those little things. And it sounds like a lot. It sounds like a marriage counseling session we're having right now, but it almost becomes something you want to do, not something you have to do, because there's so much fruit that comes from kind of sacrificially giving. The other person just will naturally, usually, hopefully respond to that as well.
Yeah, that's well said. And I do talk about this in our sessions, that even with our girls, like, I would try to get them, especially when kids are teenagers, they're not always thinking of other people first, but I would try to get them to just say, hey, just ask mom, does she need anything? Mm-hmm. And supervisors, managers, I say this, right? Just walking around, whether it's you're physically with your people or virtually, but just checking in. Is there anything I can do for you? Anything you need from me? 95% of the time, whether it's your spouse or your kids or your coworkers or direct reports, people will generally say, no, I'm good, but thanks for asking. It doesn't sound like much, but we can get so wrapped up into our own lives that just simply saying, is there anything I can do for you? And again, I'm not always perfect with this, but just, I know that maybe I can stop and get something at the store for you, whatever. It's just getting in that rhythm. Again, if I kept statistics, 98% of the time, Jen says, all good. Like, I don't need anything. But we try to do that with each other. And if even, Jen's running errands, she'll say, I know you're leaving on Monday for that trip. Anything you need before you go on your trip. And that, again, sounds simple, but that starts to just, it creates a different level of intimacy, I think, that is necessary.
And then I know that date nights are a big deal for a lot of couples, and those are very important. The best gift, especially if you have kids, is to have a good marriage. But sometimes, we have property to take care of. We have chores, you and I, and we have all these things. And sometimes just going to the hardware store together, working out in the yard together. Those are all times, I think, if you can get a mindset of, it doesn't really matter what we're doing it together. Mm-hmm. That song from Carly Simon, I think it's called "It's the Stuff That Dreams." This the stuff that dreams are made of, and the whole premise is, just the mundane day to day with a partner that you feel secure and loved by. That's a dream. And so just doing those things together, even if it's chores or housework or whatever, just realize that's good. That's time spent together and working towards something together. And I always appreciate that as much as I do going out to dinner.
Yeah, good. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is, and Jen's reminded me of this many times over the years, is that we're on the same team. Because when you're going through conflict, or if we're all going to be frustrated about things at work or other stresses, and it kind of gets back to that, no, I'm fine, don't need to talk about it, I'm just thinking or whatever. I think being able to actually communicate about stuff and realize, even in the midst of conflict, and frankly, there probably is a larger chance of conflict when there's stress at work, because now you're coming home with stuff on your heart or your mind, and realizing that you'll be better on the other side of conflict. Jen's helped me with that a lot, because that wasn't kind of what I was used to. And so to be able to say, even if we're having an issue, we are on the same team, we're wearing the same jersey, and when this is all done, we want to be better on the other side. And I think that just again, in our sessions, we do a whole module on having difficult conversations, which is certainly critical in the workplace, but as or more critical at home. And so you've definitely helped with that. So I could go on for hours, obviously, but maybe this will be just part one of several. But thanks for hanging out with me professionally today and sharing stories. Any last minute things you wanted to say? I appreciate everything that you...
Just grateful that I am hanging out with you professionally, but the great thing is you're the same person personally as you are professionally. Your values, everything that you teach, you absolutely live out in our marriage, and I'm just grateful for that.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions or thoughts about today's episode, or even ideas for a future episode, you can contact us through our website at johnharrisonvip.com or follow us on any of our social media platforms.